Pro tips from Barry's Auto Body. Staten Island's only eco-friendly, full-service auto body and mechanical repair facility. We accept all insurance companies.
How you doing? I'm Barry from Barry's Auto Body, and today we're doing a video to show you how to check a car out if you're buying a used car. It's basically from a body shop perspective. We also do mechanical here, so it'll be a little bit of mechanical also. And this is what to look for, basically things that you want to stay away from. I'll point over the car. This side, one thing I was noticing on the car is this side. The line seems pretty good. You know, it's a little bit open up there, but that's not out of the ordinary. Some cars, especially an American car, the lines will be a little bit more open. On a Japanese and a European car, they will be a little bit tighter. But if it's, you know, a hair off, that's not something to look for. But on the other side of the car, let me show you what is. See how that side was. Now you go to this side of the car where the problem is. You see how basically it's kind of making a V, this line coming up? If you looked at an angle, you could actually see that this door is sticking out a little bit more than the other door, which shows me that there's a problem. Also down here, I'm seeing that the line is off down here. This line is a little bit bigger than it should be. And most importantly, it's crooked, which means that the door has a space, which is going to cause first off, that's telling me that the car was hit or the hinges on the door are out of alignment, which is going to cause wind noises. Now, after looking at that, upon further inspection, I'm starting to see something that I don't like over here, which is basically the paint itself is starting to dull out. Now, it's one thing for paint to dull out, but this, if the camera gets a little close, you could actually see a little bit of a grainy feel to it. And this is not, from what I'm looking at, this is not from the paint dulling out. This is actually from improper repairs. There's a difference. Paint that dulls out, we're able to, you can actually compound it, you can bring it back to life. There's a lot of things that we can do to bring it back to life. But when you start to get that grainy look in the paint, and what that basically is, it's called dieback. The paint itself is basically sucking into the primers. And what that ends up happening is because the primers themselves were not dry when they actually painted the car. So that turns into be a problem, and it's not something that can be fixed. And it's also a telltale sign of an improper repair. Now, upon further inspection, when we look on the other side, we'll bring the camera around. And if we see on the inside of the window, you could actually see the marks from bad bodywork on the inside of the window. And if a quarter panel was cut off a car and changed, this is usually where the seam would be. You'll see the seam sealer is all broken up over there. And there'll be a couple imperfections over there. I'm also noticing, we'll pull the camera back here, and I'm seeing very importantly, the trunk itself is out of alignment here. Now, if we pull the camera here, I could even see that the quarter panel sits further out than the trunk. So that line is definitely, that's causing me to look over here even more. Once I see that, that's telling me the back of the car is not safe. Now, upon further inspection, I'm seeing over here that the inside of this quarter was actually hit by the trunk, which tells me that the car was hit on that side and that the trunk actually pushed into the quarter and destroyed the paint over here, which means that it wasn't a small hit. You know, if the paint on this side of the car was hit, and I don't really see any problems with this quarter, any paint issues, I don't see any grainy looks over here. It's not like the paint is dying back. It's just, you know, the paint's a little dull just because it's a little older, but there is a difference because it doesn't have a, the best way I could explain what dieback looks like is kind of like a sandpaper kind of feel. You'll actually feel it, you know. This would be nice and shiny, and then if you go to the side that has the dieback on it, you'll actually feel the paint has somewhat like a real fine grade sandpaper kind of feel to it. I'm going to pop the trunk real quick because I want to see what's going on back there. when I was noticing those small little imperfections on the outside, now we have, this is a telltale sign. Now we have a really big imperfection. This seam sealer, I mean, this is actually not even a bad job, this is a horrible job. If you see seam sealer on a car like this, you know that there's a problem underneath, and it's not a car that I wouldn't even think about buying this car. That just tells me basically that I have to start getting a little bit more inside. And there, it's exactly, I took it apart further, but you can actually see the car is starting to rust. The inside of this quarter is still bent. It was never pulled right. So this is really the only reason why I'm even looking here is because usually when somebody does work like that to the inside, there's going to be some kind of signs on the outside that they didn't do it right. Now I'm going to go around the rest of the car. Based on the bumper, I mean, the bumper looks fairly good for the year of the car. It is a 2007, so you can't expect a brand new car. These little chips, I mean, one thing that you do have to know, in order to do them right, you would have to paint the whole bumper, but it's kind of normal on a 2007 car to have that. One thing you want to look at is the lights. You know, are the lights clear, or do they have any kind of yellow tint? These have very small spots in them. They're not that noticeable, so it's not really that big of a deal. And they do look like they're on the outside. If it's on the outside, it can actually be, we could dry sand it down, and then they could actually redo the lens and kind of clean the light. So that's not really a problem. Looking around the car, I mean, you can see the dent. Right next to the bird food over there. But there's a dent right there. Now, one of the easiest ways, if you want to check a car for dents, one of the easiest ways is actually very simple. Any kind of rag, you know, a clean rag obviously, you basically just put the rag on your hand, and when you feel the car, if you're going to start feeling for dents around the car to see if there is any dents or any imperfections, try to keep your hand nice and flat. Don't open your hand, don't sit there and keep it curved because you won't be able to feel it right. And basically just go over the car with a rag, and as you do that, you're actually going to feel all the imperfections. As you go over that, you're going to feel any imperfections that you have in the car. All right, and you would go over each panel. Seen a couple paint issues over here, and this is something that I would feel too. If you go over it, you can see that it's not just a paint issue, because now I'm going over it with my hands and the rag, and it's a lot easier to feel that it also has a dent in it too. So there may be a paint issue there, but once you get rid of that paint issue, you have a dent there also. Now, being that we're over here, I'm going to we'll check the wheels. These wheels have a little bit of minor damage here, which that you can see has got yellow in it, so that's from hitting the yellow curb, parking. Obviously the tire does have a little bit of a dig in the tire, so that tire is no good. And on the side wheels, the tire would have to be changed. You can repair a tire when it's here, but anything on the side of a tire, you cannot repair. So that would have to be a new tire. They'd have to change the tire on this car. And it's something you have to know when you're looking at it. You see the rocker molding down here. You want to check the lines here. You also want to check the lines from the door to the fender. If it's lining up right, want to make sure that nothing's hitting there. As we're going around the car, I could also even see this headlight. Now, this headlight is starting to turn yellow. And you can even see all the fog right along the headlight. You see all the fog around it. This particular headlight, though, is not really a problem. The difference is that if the headlight has a leak, if there was any kind of rubber seal that wasn't put on the back of the headlight to hold the bulbs in, what ends up happening over time, sometimes you'll get moisture on the inside of the light, which cannot be fixed, cannot be cleaned. There's nothing you can do about it. On the outside of the light, though, is not really a big deal. There's actually a process that we do at Barry's Auto Body. And what they do, they would GA the whole headlight, and basically they bring it back to life, and then they would shoot it. We have a specific clear that's actually designed to headlight. Now I'm going over the car also. I want to check the front of the car. See how these lines are nice and tight? I don't see any gaps in these lines. They're nice and symmetrical. They go all the way across. Very good. I'm going to check the bumper line here also, which this side is down a little bit, but it is a rubber bumper. So on a 2007, that's really not that much out of the ordinary, kind of normal. I mean, this side is the way that it should be, and they almost, very hard probably even see in the camera because they almost look identical. So they're a little bit off. That's not really anything to be concerned about. And I'm not really seeing any dye back in the paint. I don't see the grainy. I see that the paint on a 2007 is getting a little bit on the duller side, but it doesn't have that grainy look to it. A wheel alignment sheet on the car. Now, it's very important before you do a car, before you buy a car, you really should, first off, you should get it checked by a mechanic, but these, I'm just going over the things that you can see on your own before you do, to see if it's even worth bringing it to a mechanic to get it checked out. Now, the wheel alignment, once we did a wheel alignment, and I'll show you in a second why we did the wheel alignment, we're seeing that the wheel alignment is off. We're showing that the front wheel alignment basically is off on both sides, but that's not really an issue. That could be corrected. It's slightly off, and that's just normal wheel alignment. The issue that we're having, though, is back here on the rear. I'm showing that the rear right, basically the rear right and then the rear left, actually are a lot further off. And it's, you know, it's showing me something in the rear when both sides are off this far, that there may be a problem back there, and it's something that we have to check out. Now, we also have another sheet, which is the NADA, the car value, which the retail value, clean retail, which I wouldn't consider this car a clean retail. Clean trade-in, if you're going to trade the car into a dealer, and this is the price, just so you know, on NADA, which NADA, as far as we're concerned, would be the most accurate value. I wouldn't recommend any other books when you're buying a car. A lot of times they have, you know, different blue books or red books. I would stay away from those, and NADA would be the most accurate value for what the car actually goes for. And even if it's a little bit on the, you know, NADA, if anything, would probably be not much. It's the closest one, but they're usually a little bit on the higher side. Now, you have trade-in to trade into a dealer, average trade-in, which this car would probably be, I would consider this car average or rough, probably rough, and then rough trade-in. So these are the different values, and each one of these values you have to add tax to also. Whatever your local sales tax is, that has to be added onto those values. And you want to make sure that you have the car's mileage, you have to go over the car's options also, leather seats, and NADA will run down if you go online, NADA.com, and if you go online you can look up the value and it'll have everything there. Another thing that I'm noticing here is basically, I'm noticing a lot of excess wear. Now, it's one thing, the other side had a kind of normal curb rash. This side tells me, I mean, especially when you have these big digs over here, what this is telling me is that this person, they hit the curb a lot. You know, the way that they're driving when they're parking the car, and they're hitting the curb so much that they may be doing damage to the suspension of it. And I would definitely, on something like this, if we put it on the lift, we would want to check the ball joints. We would want to make sure that there's no tie rods that are loose, that the ball joints themselves, that the rubber didn't wear away, because that is one thing that will happen. After, you know, excessive, it's one thing, I mean, all cars, people park, sometimes you hit the curb a little bit, but when you see that much curb rash, that's a problem. That's just telling me that they hit the curb a little bit more than normal. Another lines that we do like to check would be the lines over here, which these actually seem pretty good. But if you do see that, if there's any kind of crookedness or if the fender is sticking out a little bit, you want to check all the body lines. Body lines are very important. All right. Now basically that wheel alignment sheet was showing that the rear of the car, that the wheels are off a little bit on both sides. And if we look at the wheel, one thing that we could do, I'll show you a little trick when you're checking, and this is just for a general rule of thumb of looking at it. You stick your hand into here, and basically you can see, I mean, my full hand fits in there no problem. And this wheel, I mean, by eye, this wheel actually looks a little bit back to me. And if I go to the back of the car too, and if we look at the car, straight on. It's tough to see with the camera, but basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if the wheel itself is sitting too far in. And the wheels do sit in a little bit, but I'm going to check this side. I'm going to check how far this sits in, and then I'm going to also just take a visual look. It's not an exact science when it comes to that. You're just seeing if, you know, if you should look further into it. And I definitely recommend you should get a wheel alignment, but this is just when you're going to first check the car out and you want to see if it's something that you should, you know, bring to a mechanic and have it looked at, or bring to a body shop and have it looked at. But if you're seeing that one wheel is sitting in further than the other wheel, then that's a problem. If both of them are the same, then usually, not always, but usually that'll be a good sign that they're both at the same, they both have the same angle. Now we're going to look over here, and I can see, because the bumper itself, there's one thing I'm noticing also, and this is what I was talking about before about the car. It seems like it's swayed over this way. You want to look at the bumper lines too. Is the bumper lining up the way that it should? And this one is not. You can actually see, I mean, if you feel, I could see and I could feel that you do have a dent over here, and also the bumper itself is not lining up, because the car itself underneath, if I put this on the lift, I know that the car itself is going to be pushed over a little bit. This car was never pulled right. So now you have frame damage on this car that was never pulled right. When I go over here, you can actually see, I mean, you can feel a dent over here. I go a little bit further down. You can feel a dent over there. Some of them then you can see, but you could always, whatever you can't see, you definitely could feel. It's a lot easier to feel a dent than see it sometimes, especially on the small ones. See, this dent is a little bit harder to see, but as I'm going around, this is one of the small ones that you'll be able to feel. And especially on a silver car, black cars, the dent will stick out a little bit more. If it was a silver car, a white car, a lot of times the dents, it doesn't show as much by eye, but you could feel it a lot easier. Now we're going to go on the inside of the car. See the seats themselves. If this doesn't bother you, that's fine. There's nothing that's going to fix these. You know, if this doesn't bother you, it won't be a problem. It's more of a cosmetic thing, but there is nothing that will fix these. You would have to redo the entire seat. On a leather seat, to fix this hole, you would actually have to at least cut the patch out, and it's not easy to do. Sometimes you'd end up just buying a U. For this, you would definitely buy a UC for it. It wouldn't be worth it to fix it. One other thing that you really want to check is the car's, basically, does the car have any lights on? Now, if we go into here, if you see any check engine light, anything like that, any airbag light, you know you have a problem, because those don't come on for small problems. They only come on when there's an issue. One thing on the inside of the car that I would check also is basically the headliner, because these are very tough to clean. And a lot of times this is also a telltale sign of how the person was with their car. If you're seeing that the headliner itself has, you know, cigarette burns and things like that, you can normally, you know, good rule of thumb, I mean, the person wasn't really that careful with their car if they're getting cigarette burns all over the interior. All right, so basically I'm going to go and we'll open the hood now. One thing I'm noticing, the hood itself, the shocks, this hood should stay open. This has shocks on the hood, so it doesn't have one of the rods that hold it open. So those shocks themselves, they can't be fixed. So I'm noticing those shocks are no good. The engine itself looks pretty clean. I would recommend check all the fluids. I'm not going to go into the fluids today, because we actually on barrysautobody.com and our YouTube channel, we actually have another video that shows checking all the fluids on the car. You could refer to that if you like. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to lift the car up, and I'm going to show you, especially the rear of the car where we can tell it was hit. We're going to check the car a little bit further underneath. All right, now we're actually going to go underneath the car, and I'm noticing, look at this, underneath the car, and this is what I was talking about before in the rear of the car. Look at this. The bumper itself, and the splash shield's hanging down. That exhaust is tight. That's good. All right, the exhaust is not a problem. They never fasten the bottom of the bumper in. You can actually see, if you look at the bracket here, the floor is even a little bit bent here, incorrectly also. And these are all things that, when you look at the outside of the car, you could realize. Now, how we were talking about how that wheel alignment sheet showed that the suspension was off. If we pull the camera right here, this whole subframe, which this subframe roughly installed is probably around $1,200 for a new subframe on a car. So I don't think you'd want to buy a $10,000 car where you have to put all this money in. It'd be crazy. But you can see the subframe itself, and it looks like they even have a mark there, like they knew it was damaged and the shop just didn't change it. There's actually a mark. It looks like it was wiped off somewhat, but I know what that is because that's from one of those, from a paint marker. So they must have known it was damaged and they just didn't change it. So I can see the subframe, which is actually the subframe holds the entire suspension on the car. And if that is bent, it's not an easy fix. You can't even straighten these. The only thing you can do with those is cosmetic paint or change it. So anytime it's bent like that, it would have to be changed. It's a very expensive repair and it's not safe to drive. Something like that, if you're driving the car, it's a very unsafe car to drive. Anytime any kind of suspension part is bent. The rest of the suspension doesn't look too bad. You know, the normal rust, things like this isn't really that big of a deal. I even see underneath here another one of those marks from whatever marker they use. They must have marked this up to whatever shop did the work. So they never changed the part. They knew it was damaged, and whether it got past quality control or they intentionally didn't change it, but they're letting a customer drive around with a bent subframe that's totally damaged. So it's not a car that I would want to buy. Now we're going to take a look. We'll take a look at underneath the front of the car. I'm actually noticing some issues on the front of the car also. You want to pull the camera right here. We're seeing all the fluids that are leaking, which that tells you right there this is engine oil because this is actually the drain for the engine oil. So you do have a leak there, and it's not just there, it's splashing all over the bottom of the car. So this thing has an engine leak. I can actually see up here that it looks like it's been there for a while. I'm also noticing this flex pipe, which the flex pipe's not that big of a deal. This could be changed. That's only the outside cushion. But I'm noticing that this is actually starting to break off. From bottoming out, I'm noticing that the subframe on the front of the car, I mean, this is kind of normal on this year of a car, but one thing I would want to check is make sure that there's no bends on it. But this is all scraped up from the car bottoming out. On the subframe, this is what I was saying, on this particular side, this is the side where it seems like the customer hit the wheel a lot more, which the passenger side of the car, it's more common to hit curbs and things like that because it actually is on the other side of the car and it's harder to park. But I'm just noticing a few things on this side. And I'm even noticing this front subframe on this side has a bunch of scratches, a little bit of a dent here. So that's all. I mean, this from normal bottoming out, there's no leaks here, so I wouldn't really worry about that. And I'm not even as worried about the subframe as I am just checking it out and knowing that I have to check this subframe out on an alignment sheet and just make sure that it's actually, that it measures right. The one thing that does get me concerned is this oil leak, because if it has an oil leak and we don't know where, the oil leak could be very expensive to fix. If there's any kind of one recommendation, if you have a car that you are checking out, let it run for a little while, because if there is an oil change, if there's an oil leak, let it run for a while, and you'll be able to see right on the floor if there is a leak. If you see water on the floor, that's kind of normal. That a lot of times the air conditioner would leave that. That comes from the AC condenser just getting wet and from water dripping down. But if you're seeing any kind of engine oil, transmission fluid, antifreeze, you know you have a leak. You know, if you let it run, me personally, I would let the car run at least an hour, And even better than that, I would actually like to take it on a test drive first and then bring it back and let it run for an hour. This way the engine's going for a while. All right, basically, one thing that you do want to check when you have an oil leak like this, so you really should check it every time. When you pull the dipstick out, just pull the oil dipstick, and you should check the transmission dipstick also, and just see if you see any kind of crud, any kind of iron filings, anything at all that doesn't look like a normal clean oil, then it's something that you have to worry about. If you see any kind of metal residue, even a small amount, that's a problem. That tells you that you have basically gears inside are grinding down, and that's the metal from the gears inside that are actually grinding down, and it's only a matter of time before you need either the engine or the transmission. So you should check that. And that's it for our video today. I want to say thank you. I'm Barry at Barry's Auto Body, located at 4301 Amboy Road, Staten Island, New York. Our slogan, which some people that drive by see it outside, if by accident we should meet. And I want to thank you for watching our video. Thank you very much.